North Atlantic Treaty Organization came in April of 1949, and if it was implemented basically by the United States and Britain, and the idea was that it was to provide protection for the North Atlantic, in other words, North America and Western Europe. And I would like to just read the paragraph because it's so, what they tell us this is for. The parties to this treaty reaffirm their faith in the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and their desire to live in peace with all peoples and all governments. They are determined to safeguard the freedom, common heritage, and civilization of their peoples, founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. So that's the opening paragraph of NATO. And then 49, and they immediately, as Chris said, they brought Greece and Turkey in, of all things, you know, and it's because they had made a deal with Turkey for sure, and probably with Greece. Then the big debate came when they wanted to bring in Germany. So in 1954, Germany became a NATO member. There was a lot of backlash over this, and particularly in the Canadian government, where, of course, they went along a year later and approved the Germany being in NATO. And in our parliament, actually, unfortunately, Caldwell of the then CCF agreed, and half the CCF voted for allowing Germany, and a big group voted against. So they were split on it entirely. But anyway, then later Spain was brought in. So by this time, by 1968, of course, they had 15 countries in NATO, so you know the story. But I have a little booklet that was written by Nino Pasti. He was the head of the European branch of NATO, and he got disillusioned with what they were planning, all their war planning, and he reported to the Italian Parliament. And this little book is his speech, and it's very interesting because it turns out that in 1950, the Korean War, the U.S. planned to use the nuclear bomb. And when the British government got hold of that information, Attlee, who was then the Prime Minister, went to the United States immediately and said, no, 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 don't use the bomb. Because at that time, delivering the bomb required a certain type of airplane or missiles, and they didn't have long-range missiles. So Attlee was afraid if they bombed in Korea, that Britain would be smashed by the USSR, that they would retaliate. So he didn't want. It's all through history. It seems that the recent history, the United States was prepared to give any other country up to protect themselves, which is going on today. After the dropping of the bomb on Japan, we were constantly threatened. They put air raid sirens at all the schools. They sent us how we could protect ourselves. They gave us routes for escape where roads weren't even built yet. And we were constantly bombarded that the Russians were going to send a bomb over. Although they didn't have a missile strong enough. And the peace movement started then. People started to oppose. In 1949, a group of people in the world got together, and they formed the World Peace Council. And then that was in 49 to counteract this terrible thing that was facing humanity if they should use these terrible bombs. And that grew to be a worldwide movement, and it got right down into the communities. Where I lived in North Vancouver at the time, we had a group of, we called it the North Vancouver Peace Council. And every little community had peace councils and people getting against a war, or particularly a nuclear war. So you can see the pressure on people was tremendous to hide and to not get involved, because at that time we also had the anti-communist scare, which kept people going. But in any case, that, as we know, has developed into a huge, almost worldwide military controlled totally by the United States, because if you follow do the research, you'll see that it's the generals in the U.S. that make the decisions. So in terms of Canada, shortly after that, we had NORAD, the North Atlantic Air Defense, was signed between Canada and the United States. And so that the Canadian military basically became under the control of the U.S. But you have to go into the agreement to see the nitty-gritties to make that connection. NORAD is now, I got that in another place. Oh yeah, the U.S. Northcom, NORAD and the U.S. Northcom. Now, if you followed the recent military expansions in the United States, they have divided the world into commands. They have AfricaCom, Eurocom, ChinaCom. Every country in the world has a region that comes under a U.S. command. And so the U.S. North Command is, of course, covers Canada and particularly the Arctic. Now, there's been a lot of agreements signed and broken during that time, and so it's wide open.